Perfect. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, guests. Thank you so much for coming here this evening. I just need to remind you that it is an open meeting, which means you get to watch our meeting in the open. So I need you to be respectful and quiet so that all can hear, so that that we can get through items as quickly as possible. So we're happy you're here. Mission and vision statement. The mission of the Nampa School District is to ensure high levels of achievement for every student. Vision statement. Every student is fully engaged in extraordinary learning experiences, preparing for successful transition to the next stage of life. Nampa Education Association comments. See Brian.
I don't see Brian tonight, and he did not check in with me, so I am not sure.
Okay. Trustee comments? I'll go ahead and start. Okay.
I'm thankful for YouTube. Summer trouble took me away from the last two meetings, but I was able to get caught up. So thanks, trustees.
I just want to check if microphones are definitely on this evening.
Okay, so public comments, we did get some requests. Just want to remind you guys that, and it appeared they all are on masking. So they will be, I want to ask the board, we do have one gentleman who has practice at 6:30 and just requested to go first. And I'm not going to change our protocol unless you guys are okay with it.
Yeah, happy to.
So I'll feel okay with that. Okay. Sorry, I didn't catch your name. Sorry. Joe.
Yeah. These are ready now.
Yep, we're gonna have you go now.
Okay.
Okay. And you have 3 minutes. You
Is there a
just-
microphone or am I just speaking loud?
You're just speaking loud. There's a mic right here that should pick you up.
My name is Joe Cockrell. I'm a follower of Christ. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I'm a citizen of Nampa as of December of last year. I left California. It's one of these people that came here from California. And I've been talking to my wife for a long time about leaving, and she didn't want to go. And when they closed our school and masked our children, she said it's time to go. Because it showed us that our children are not necessary. They're not important enough to hold school. And they come here and the school's closed. And the kids are wearing masks forcibly. It was really sad. I decided to homeschool our kids last year. And both of my boys were very behind in math. And I just want to say, for one thing, I really support teachers. This is not about teachers in any way whatsoever. But our boys, I homeschooled them, and our boys actually excelled in math. They're ahead of the kids in school now. But I chose to bring them back at the last couple of months of school because I wanted them to introduce them to some kids in class. It was really hard for them. Both of my boys have asthma. They cried and complained that it was hard to breathe during class, and sometimes when they were playing. It was just not right and not fair. But I do want to address the parents. At one point, is this not? At what point?
Last year.
Joe,
They're covering up.
Joe, you're addressing
Yeah, okay,
the,
I'm addressing you.
the board, I get it, but
You know what's next?
Yes.
When vaccines are okay by children, that's next.
Yep.
That's gonna be the next mandate. Where's your line?
Joe,
Here's my line. My line, I've got 43 seconds.
right, but you need to
We'll
address,
pause the time then if you're gonna talk. Whatever.
okay, that's fine, but you need to address the board,
I'm
okay,
addressing-
and not ask questions to the
I'm not
audience,
asking questions.
okay? We've completely changed
Well,
our
okay, I'll
schedule.
address the board. We have demands.
Thank you.
Okay, could you rewind a little bit of that clock, because she was speaking through about 15 seconds of my time.
Just no question time.
Just start talking, I'll.
Okay. We have some demands, because you're supposed to do the will of the parents, because you're elected officials. Number one, we will not force masks on our children where they speak and breathe. Number two, you will not close the school again. Number three, you will not force test our children for anything. Number four, you will not mandate COVID vaccine for our children. Number five, we demand that the qualifications to sit on this board are that you cannot be a member of any teachers' union.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Consent agenda. Would entertain a motion?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Can we just move leadership stipends to the top of new business? I think I saw an email late in the day about a change to that.
Sure.
So can we move that after the Idaho Arts Charter?
No. You have to,
Yes.
What's that?
We have a second?
a second.
I
You
thought
just
our
need one
procedure was just
trustee
one
ask.
trustee asking to pull it. So, yeah,
Yeah, so the motion is to approve it with that item removed to,
Sure.
thank you.
So move to approve with that item moved down to new business.
now we need a second. There we go. Perfect. It was moved by trustee Kip and seconded by trustee Keller. Ross, sorry, thank you. I looked that way. Trustee Ross, thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay.
Chairman Simpson, I apologize, statement of clarification. We do have an addendum to the personnel action report that is not listed in this consent agenda. Do we need to say a clarification to add that?
It's listed as an addendum, and generally the board takes those two together.
Do you not sit
I
under
see it in there.
the?
Yep, I had to click it open.
Okay,
Gotcha. Thank
yeah,
you. I
yeah, it's
apologize.
just the separate.
Thank you.
Perfect, no problem, thank you. Okay. First item of new business.
So tonight we have Jackie Collins joining us from Idaho Arts Charter for her annual update to the board.
Good evening, members of the board, and thank you for having me again. As a district-sponsored school, every year we come and talk a little bit about what we've been doing. We have been celebrating 17 years of operation, so that's pretty exciting. We were supposed to have a 15-year big celebration at Jump, and that got postponed, and then it got postponed again, and it's still getting postponed. So it's going to be in October, and we postponed it again. So anyway, maybe it'll be the 20th year that we'll get to have that happen. We have arts integration and standalone arts programs. We are a K-12 school, K through 4. Actually, it's going to be K through 5. I should have corrected that. We just finished another building over on Broadmoor. So K-5 will be on the Broadmoor Way site, and then 6 through 12 is at the original Lakeview School Building on 5th Street. Our fundamental pillars are innovation. Our students will be innovative problem solvers with a dynamic and flexible intellect. Our arts integration to deepen students' learning and develop a broad understanding of the arts through the integration of the arts into the core content. College and career readiness, we seek to prepare students for the challenges and expectations of college and career, and self-empowerment to create an environment where students learn self-empowerment through the arts and through their academics. Our student demographics are very similar to the Nampa community. We're about 25% Hispanic, 11% special ed, 42% free and reduced, and about 8% ELL. What a year, as you well know. We were fully remote when we opened, then we went to hybrid, then we went back to remote, then we went back to hybrid, and then finally we ended the year full and in person. Our IRI scores from May, we felt pretty good about those. We saw good growth over the year, and hopefully that'll continue. It was a real struggle, obviously, when you're hybrid and you're remote and, trying to get testing done on students and, not everyone's, when they're remote are receiving the same instruction, but, there's so much, that needs to happen at home. So it was a tough year, but felt pretty good about that. ISET data, and this is compared to the state averages. We did pretty well overall in English language, not so well in math. And so that's really going to be our area of focus. There wasn't any math group that even met the state averages. And so that's concerning. So what's this data tell us? We need a lot of growth to close our gaps from the learning loss of this past school year and the previous year, because it all started in March of the previous year. We have hired an additional teacher per grade, K-5, to be an intervention specialist. They will be in charge of collecting data, moving students by providing lessons at the student skill level, pre-teaching, reteaching, even co-teaching at their grade level. And we were able to do that because of the federal funds that we've received. PLC will be data-driven to improve our instruction, and PLC will be implemented once a week again. And we weren't able to do that with hybrid and remote. What this data didn't show, it doesn't show how innovative our teachers were this year, moving from hybrid to remote to in-person. It doesn't show students moving rooms and in and out of school, because we had students that moved from one teacher to another based on whether they wanted to still be remote. And so we had to try to get all the remote students together and then had, the in-person students. We can't control home environments, and students need to be in school. More social, emotional attention was given to our students than any other year before. And even though our teachers met our students' needs, some of this isn't evident in ISAT and MAPS testing and IRI. Teachers did see growth in students still, but you can't always show that through tests. We have advanced opportunities. Students can receive college and high school credit in these classes taught by our teachers: U.S. history, government, English, Spanish, ballet, choreography, college algebra, trigonometry, and calculus. We have a designated study hall time where students can also take online classes for college credit. And then there's a college prep class for all seniors. Opportunities that are unique to our school. All of our arts classes are taught by practicing artists who are also certified teachers. And that's not easy to find. Electric orchestra, we have one of probably a handful of electric orchestra groups in the United States at our school. Global Beats, which is a percussion group and also has instrumental, and then rock band. Dance performances. Both of our campuses have piano labs. All of our students take piano at some point for a number of years. All students 6 through 12 participate in the National History Day program and present at our school and then go on to regionals and state. Dance team, we even have a dance team at the elementary. And then all of our high school students visit a college campus. They go to classes. So in ninth grade, they might go to Boise State and visit Boise State campus. And then by the time that they're a junior and senior, they will go to University of Idaho or ISU, spend the night, attend classes, kind of get that real college experience, because we really want our students to go on in one form or another. And so we make that a goal. The focus for this year is we've added an intervention teacher in each grade level, K through 5. Our focus is closing the gap in academics, adapting many of the lessons learned and the new software into our in-person classrooms. Obviously technology was this huge push last year. And so everybody, there was a lot of people that weren't comfortable with that, and they got comfortable with it. And now they can continue to use that in some form in their classroom. We have a new federal programs director and a full-time ELL teacher added this year. And we added also an additional counselor at the elementary campus. So we have 2 counselors at the elementary campus to deal with, some of the social and emotional issues of our students. I think that's it. Is that it? Okay. So do you have any questions for me?
Questions for Jack?
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight and for, allowing our students in Nampa to attend our school.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
Then remember, we moved the leadership stipends from the consent agenda to this next item. Go there.
Madam Chair, I think you saw the question I asked about the hard to fill, whether we are approving a generic hard to fill or is it more categories? And I think we got an email this afternoon. So
The email basically said that the team is constructed of lots of stakeholders that talk about it. 2 reasons. So one of them, the hard to fill, currently, if we would label that, it would be the positions that are open right now: OT, special ed, nurses, and SLPs. So those would be the ones. The generic part of that is sometimes in December, we have a need for a science teacher or a math teacher. And the desire was to be able to use that depending on what happened in order to attract teachers that we can't predict where we might have openings. So it's both and is what the hope was.
So it would be those identified special education teachers and then teachers needed to be hired after November.
Yeah.
I move we approve the leadership stipends with the hard to fill section, including those identified by the superintendent and those staff that would need to be hired after November.
Second.
It was moved by trustee Westfall and seconded by trustee Kipp. Any other questions or discussion? Not seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. That was approved.
So as promised, Michelle Tripp is here, and I believe Lori Mon is joining us by phone to do a presentation related to an adoption on the art curriculum.
Okay, so I'm getting Lori Mon on the phone, which is going to be a little tricky to hear, so I'll turn it up as loud as I can for audience members. I don't know. Hey, Lori?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So I've got you on speakerphone, so hopefully we can hear okay on speakerphone. Okay, did you want to start us off, Lori?
Yes, we're
Okay.
here to recommend my adoption of an art curriculum. And I'm gonna mute myself, but I'll be on the line and let you, Michelle, take it away.
Okay, good. All right, good news is everyone's giving me the thumbs up that they are able to hear, so this is good news. Okay.
Wonderful, thank you.
I would like to introduce myself again. First of all, thank you again for having us here, but I know there were a couple trustees that weren't here last time. I'm Christina Wilkins and I teach art at Nampa High School.
And I'm Michelle Tripp, and I'm the principal at Centennial Elementary School.
And we are here today to formally present our recommendation for our art curriculum adoption for the Nampa School District.
Okay, so you guys had asked at the last meeting when we gave you some information about our process, you asked a little bit more about the rubric. So we wanted to bring our rubric information to you, which you have in your board packet, but the summary of what's on the rubric is that we looked at National Core Arts Standard Alignment, which also included Idaho standards because they're one and the same in this case. And the criteria we looked at were that they were completely aligned to the standards, and the activities are organized or searchable by standards, and that there's a scope and sequence that will help guide teachers in how to follow the curriculum. And then criteria 2 was resources. So that's like quality of resources. So when we assessed and got feedback from parents who came to our parent night and students who came to our feedback night as well, we had them look for accessibility, variety, relevancy, scaffolding, student choice, which came up over and over again as both a student desire and a parent desire, and actually teacher desire. Like we all wanted more student choice, and that they were culturally relevant, meaning like it's relevant to our times. It's not all just, ancient art, but it's also current art as well. So that was an important criteria. Criteria 3 was to enhance professional practice, meaning our teachers had a strong desire to get better at being teachers of what they're teaching. So we looked for a curriculum that would help us improve our teaching of art in the district. And then criteria 4 is the personalization of student experience, meaning that kids have more say in the kinds of things they're learning and doing in their art classes. And that's also teachers' desires. And that it supports executive functioning, which just means the art that we're doing helps them create a more organized way of thinking about their world, that visual world that they live in. And then last but not least is endurance, which means that the things we teach them in art classes should be related to multiple future careers, not just professional artist as the only takeaway, but potentially a graphic design artist or, other careers that come in art, data analysis using graphics, things like that. So we looked for things that had cross-curricular connections that would allow kids to do a lot of stuff. So that's a little more detail on the rubric. I think you're up.
Great. So with that being said, our curriculum adoption committee selected a combination of curriculum that we really think will enhance the learning experience for all students. So go ahead if you can just jump to the next slide. So our
Maybe the wrong direction.
well, I can just speak to our first and kind of most cohesive curriculum that we recommend adopting is the Art of Education University. This is a digital curriculum that is entirely teacher facing, but that doesn't mean that students don't have the ability to engage with it. Go ahead and head to the next slide. So what is so fabulous about this curriculum is that it kind of hits on all of our levels that we're trying to hit as professionals. So it offers professional development. It has a K-12 curriculum, and Art of Education also allows the opportunity for art teachers to gain a master's program with an accredited university. Now, within the Flex curriculum, we are recommending adopting the Flex curriculum and the Pro Learning, which I'll talk about next. The Flex curriculum is our actual art curriculum that we will be using. So first and foremost, it has thousands of premium lesson plans, videos, resources, and assessments that are all created by art teachers. It is designed and curated to allow us the ability to pick and choose standards. So they are entirely custom to our own unique classes and grade levels. And then, so excitingly, it is delivered anywhere, anytime. It is you are allowed to download, print, screen share. We can use it with our Otis LMS, as well as Teams if you are at a different level. Now, with the Pro Learning, this is really hitting on our desire and our need to have those amazing resources as art educators. It is pretty easy to know that traditional PD simply does not meet the needs of art educators specifically. While we learn great pedagogical practices, there's a big need for this. So this pro learning package allows us to become better teachers. It's personalized, so it allows each teacher to pick and choose content areas that they, or subject matter that they need to gain more confidence in. This is hitting on that idea of equitable opportunities for high quality PD for all educators, our educators, and then it's continuous. This is allowing each educator to move through at their own pace, whether that's, you know, at night after your kids go to bed or whatever time works best for you. It's really pretty thrilling. And then the best part here is that we have this great resource that comes free, which is our onboarding process. We are assigned a school success manager that will help us through our entire implementation time for the next 8 years. They allow us to onboard, they'll teach us how to use the platform, they will help us develop scope and sequence work. It's pretty great. So in addition to this digital curriculum, we are also recommending adopting Scholastic Art, which is a print publication that comes out every 2 months. What's great about this is that there is variation for grade level. So we primarily are implementing this at secondary, so middle school and high school. However, we do have 2 elementary pilot programs that we also feel that this would be a great platform. So it really hits on these 4 aspects. It has the opportunity of presenting a blended learning experience. Even though it's a magazine, we still have access to digital resources, which it just allows more flexibility. It has secondary teacher support that allows lesson plans, elementary teacher support that allows for age-appropriate lessons. And then this goes beyond just building art knowledge. This is a literacy tool and allows us to also develop our ELA skills and literacy. Now, the last recommendation is very specific to ceramics. We have secondary art teachers where this is their primary medium. And as you get into high school, the quality of work and the need to expand your practice becomes intensified. So we are recommending the adoption of Clayflix, which is a monthly subscription for all secondary teachers. And basically, the easiest way to describe this is YouTube that is entirely dedicated to ceramics. So it's pretty thrilling. So that just allows teachers to not only hone their practice, but also share those tutorials and resources and artists with their students.
Okay, so back to me. Yay. So you kind of heard Christy describe what our recommendations are for purchased curriculum. So that starts with the art magazine, print and digital. That's student facing, meaning kids use that. They put their hands on it, they get to do things with it. So we're asking for 8 years of that, 520 subscriptions at 8 years. And this is in your board packet as well and on the website. We're hoping for the Art of Education, digital curriculum access, and the professional development for the teacher-facing side. And then
for just a second.
yes, for
I
sure.
know that this was in the board packet because I looked at it, but it's not currently. So I'm
Showing up.
wondering.
Oh, I pulled it up. It's under. It's an executive
content.
Oh, thank you. I forgot.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm
I'm like, I know I saw it.
Sorry.
I don't know.
apologize.
I'm glad you knew where it was loaded because I didn't know exactly where it's loaded. Do you need me to pause for a second?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Like I said, I know I
Okay.
saw it, but I was worried that we weren't finding it.
Just making sure. And then the Ceramic Arts Network, that would be 8 years of subscription, 1 for each middle, 1 for each high school. The other thing we're recommending and we're hoping for is consumable materials and display resources, because it's hard to do art if you have nothing to do art with. So we're hoping for a perpetual budget there for the next, for the span of this curriculum adoption of $1,200 per classroom per year to buy materials so we can actually do things with all of this amazing resources that we'll have. So the good news is we were given a specific budget and we came in under budget with everything we wanted. That was in part thanks to some really great feedback from some of our parents and students who came to our feedback session. who recommended that we look carefully and make sure everything we buy is something we actually intend to use instead of getting more things just because we could maybe, but so we scaled back kind of what we wanted to meet the feedback that we got. And we feel like we put together a really great proposal for that curriculum adoption. So I don't know, is it time for questions or is there anything else?
Madam Chair, if I may, I apologize if I missed this, you mentioned twice now that you're looking to get information or curriculum that would last for 8 years. Is that the goal? Is the goal this is going to be 8 years and then in 7 we renew or look?
I mean, that's our goal was when we came into this, we thought in general, a curriculum cycle can be 6 to 8 years from the state. So we were sort of targeting that. It's not a specific, like definitely in 8 years we'll re-adopt, but that's kind of was our ballpark. Yeah.
Awesome, that's great.
Yeah.
And the budget you mentioned was an 8-year budget?
Yes.
Is that, okay.
Correct. That cost is for 8 years, not 1 year times 8.
Great.
So it's 8 total years of materials and resources for that budget. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I just have one more. Is
Yes.
1,200 per classroom per year, is that doable? Is that good? Like, that's tight, isn't it?
It is, but we're extremely grateful for the opportunity of that.
Right.
What basically has happened over the years is our class sizes have gotten larger and our budget has either shrunk or maintained. So artists have a lifetime of creativity of working with what we have. So the additional money just allows students to really become more independent. So this is allowing them to work with different materials beyond your basic materials. And also allows us the opportunity of engaging them in other art opportunities beyond the classroom.
So short answer, could they use more money? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we have it, probably not, but like.
We are grateful for what we have,
But we felt on balancing, like if we took something off of this and put that money back into classrooms, we worked that a couple different ways.
Yeah.
And divided over that many classrooms was only an extra $100 or $200 if we take off one or more of these resources. So all told, we'd rather have the resources and the 1,200 than like 1,400 and not art of education or, something like that.
Right.
So we balanced, we talked about that carefully as a committee.
Is that an increase or decrease from the typical consumable budget?
So this will be an increase in addition to school budgets and department budgets that you're given.
Great.
One more question, just help me understand how this will be used at the elementary level. Just out of pure curiosity, not criticism. I'm just
Yes,
excited to
that's a
know
great
how
question because we're piloting it at 2
Right.
schools. That's Park Ridge or the Ridge. I guess the
Yes.
Ridge, that would be cool, right?
Is it the
and
ridge meaning
Centennial.
the middle school ages?
I
or-
don't know the difference. It's Park Ridge.
Okay. Okay.
I should know that. I don't. I'm sorry. It's at Centennial and Park Ridge. Centennial because we're arts integration.
Right.
And what we're doing is we're piloting the use of the Scholastic Art magazine.
Okay.
And then instead of getting all of our teachers art of education, because our elementary teachers are not certified art teachers, but this will help. We're getting one subscription for the whole school so that we can do PD together as PLCs. So like our 5th grade team might log on and look up art projects and do a module of art education to become more expertful in art.
Great.
Even though we're not certified art. So that's how we see using it, is to increase our capacity. And also,
We selected those 2 elementary specifically because they're arts focused schools.
yeah,
With the hopes that our students will get a rich arts experience all the way through their education career by the time they get to high school, that they're ready to perform and share their own unique artistic voice.
That's fantastic.
and I think we're at the elementary level. I think that's the Scholastic Art magazine is going to be incredibly useful. There's different Lexile levels of the same text on Scholastic online. So we can print the same content, but different grade levels, sort of like a Newsella or a News ELA kind of thing, but specific to art. So we're excited about that.
It's like a weekly reader of art, like back in the day.
It
Kind of
kind of
like
is.
bi-monthly. And it's great at high
Exactly.
school level because it's all
Yes.
inclusive. Like a student could complete the whole project independently or collaboratively without teacher, directed instruction.
That's exciting.
Yeah, so that's how I see us using it. Another note on that is that at elementary, we wouldn't get 1,200 per classroom. We'd get 1,200 for our whole school, which is still more than we have now. So like, we'll take it for the whole school. We don't need the kind of art supplies that secondary needs with their more in-depth projects, but that will help. So that's another piece that's different with elementary and secondary.
Was that for your 2 elementaries in the art pilot, or was that for all the elementaries?
That was for the 2 in the art pilot.
So if you can follow-up question to that is, how long are you piloting for just the 2 schools? This is an 8-year adoption that you're asking us to do. Is there thoughts in the future to do it to all the elementaries? And then you might be asking us for the 1,200 per elementary at some point?
It may be, but the scope of this adoption, I can't really speak to that. Maybe Lori can more. But the scope, this was actually a 6-12 adoption. And so I believe that conversation would come up when it's time to do a K-6 adoption or a K-5 adoption for art. So we're trying some things out. And then when that conversation comes up, if that conversation comes up, then we will have intelligent things to say about it for the other schools.
Is Lori maybe with us?
She is on the phone. Yeah. Lori, did you hear that question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I did. And part of the need right now, the immediate need for Centennial and Parker is inside their focus is art, in expeditionary learning and the art. So we want to make sure that they are supplied well with those things. And then as the need comes up and it's time to adopt for other elementaries, we have a place to go.
Do you have a proposed timeline of when you think that might happen for the other elementaries?
As we move forward and there's a need in those elementaries, we'll bring them on board.
Okay. Hopefully that's next year.
There are a lot of discussions outside of those focus right at this particular time. I do see those starting to happen as we get further into our focuses. Okay.
Thank you. No, I hope your program's successful and I hope we can roll it out district-wide soon.
I mean, that's the hope with any sort of focus or charter or magnet is that it's a learning lab. You try things and it works, hopefully, or it doesn't. And if it works, you try to roll it into every school, right? So, yeah.
Chairman, one more follow-up question. Yeah, I noticed a lot of your curriculum is digital, other than the Scholastic magazine. Were there any others that were not just digital?
So we actually had recommendations and had text-based options from Davis Publications, which was one of the curriculum that we talked about last meeting. And actually per parent feedback and student feedback, they recommended a digital curriculum adoption because of the ability to adapt and make learning relevant to the student and to the time and to the experience that they are requesting. So despite the fact that we don't have a print publication, doesn't mean that we don't have those rich art history learning experience that will still happen. And I would almost argue even more meaningful because you're able to, like in Google Images, or Google Art, you can zoom into an image beyond that we could ever do in a textbook.
Thank you. Yeah, I was curious, we know we have some students that don't always have great services at home, but to hear that it was driven by most students and parents that wanted that helps me understand.
And at the heart of all art experience is creating. So our students, take research and they begin to build ideas, but the majority of our time is spent making. So our curriculum reflects that ability.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if you want to dig into that more, like in the last, when we presented 2 weeks ago, in that packet, there's all the parent feedback and all the student feedback we received. And the most universal feedback we got was no textbooks, like no, let's not go there. Every 100% unanimous. There wasn't a single person who made a case for textbooks. Everybody made a case to take them off the recommendation. You don't need it. It's not what art is nowadays. So we honored that. And it agreed with what we already wanted, which is nice because our teachers didn't want the textbooks either, but we also wanted to put it before the public to see if we were in line with what our public wanted, and we were in this case.
Mind you, we value reading and textbooks in print, but the print that we have available to us just doesn't meet the needs of our students at this time.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Madam Chair, I move we adopt the art curriculum as proposed.
I'll second. Excellent. It was moved by trustee Ross and seconded by trustee Keller. Any more questions, discussion? Perfect. Seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Perfect. That's approved. Thank you, ladies, for your work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Next up, we have our graduation requirement revision committee.
And we're lucky to have our 2 co-chairs here, Waylon Yarbrough and trustee Ross.
Trustee Simpson, fellow trustees, thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight. We have a brief history to run down with the graduation requirement review committee. So I'm going to fill you in a little bit. We proposed a 2-page document that had 3 recommendations in your board packet. That's going to be basically what I review with you, but I want to give a little context as to how we got to that decision. So I'm going to pull that up on my laptop. If there's any questions, please stop me. Again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. The graduation requirement review committee has had a, let's call it bumpy history. And what I mean by that is the original charge, I believe, was in April of 2018, which was 2 years before I came back to the district. And so we've had some time to put things together that have been really interesting. The original charge of the committee, there were a number of them, but it boiled down to one essential question. That essential question that we have taken some time over the last few years to gather some information from various stakeholders. The question was, what do we want our students to know and be able to do when they complete their education in the Napa School District? It's a very, very important question to ask, and it's the question that is on a lot of people's minds. We just heard from our art curriculum and those pieces that start in elementary school and build to building the skills that our students need to have to enter into whatever their opportunities are after high school life. And so when I first came back to district, fellow co-chair Ross, trustee Ross, she and I met in, I believe it was January of my first year back, which was just a month or 2 before COVID hit. So you can imagine that our focus was elsewhere, but even through that, we were able to meet with a number of groups, particularly the last 2 groups we needed to meet with, our higher education folks in our community. That community included Valley folks from CWI and BSU to across the state. We reached out to them, as well as our business community. So the recommendations that I have before you are a conglomeration of various stakeholder groups, including parents, teachers, students, administrative staff, business community, and our higher ed community to look at what are the things that our students need to know and be able to do. And what we came up with, hopefully not shockingly, was that quite honestly, NAMPA does a pretty dang good job. NAMPA does a good job with the graduation requirements that we have and have had for quite some time with helping our kids develop the capacity, the skills, and the abilities to move on to whatever their next opportunities are. However, within those conversations and various stakeholders, there were a few areas that came up to revisit, and those were in the recommendations I'll discuss. Really, we're bound by what the state requirements are at a minimum in the state of Idaho, and those state requirements are 46 semester-based credits. If you're in a trimester system or other things, the math changes, but basically those credits are built around core classes with a number of electives. So your core English classes, science, math, social studies, a few other particular required credits, including health, speech, those types of things. And then you have some elective credits that a lot of our students fill in our district with various things, from our CTE opportunities where they gain certification in vocational work to maybe more academic university tracks where they're taking upper division biology and math courses to prepare for going to university for 4 years. So those are the spectrum of things that we offer. Again, that 46 credit is the baseline number. One of the things that is in the NAMPA district, which is not the same as a few of our neighboring districts, is 3 technology credits. So we do require, as a graduation requirement in the NAMPA district, 3 additional tech requirements. That was one of the areas where there was a lot of discussion and a lot of debate of whether or not we needed those, what they needed to look like, and that's one of the recommendations I'll discuss. The other areas that came up predominantly were the inclusion of a personal finance requirement, either in adding an additional class or in looking at the courses that we currently offer and looking at how we could shift those pieces to meet with those requirements, or excuse me, to meet the need of what our students are. We heard the personal finance piece from a number of stakeholders, parents, students themselves, our business community, all of those talked about the idea of personal finance. The recommendation I'll discuss in a minute talks about what we've seen there and what we may be able to do with our current system. The last 2 pieces that kind of came up over and over in talking with various groups was our humanities requirements and what those are offered, and then also our PE requirements and what we do and how we fare against the state. So that's the basis for the 3 recommendations that I want to talk to briefly with you, and then open myself for questions. Okay. So the first recommendation we have, again, I want to highlight and reiterate multiple groups of people, multiple years spanning this work, which again, maybe didn't meet the original, hey, we want to figure this out in a more timely fashion, but there were some specific reasons for that. with COVID, with change of personnel, with various things within our community which we had to address. But again, getting to the tech requirements, that came up over and over again as what we want to focus on, or what became a focus for virtually all these groups. In reviewing this, we came up with the conversation of, we do still believe, and particularly using the data from our business community and our higher ed community, we still need 3 tech credits in the Nampa School District. Those tech credits may shift and look a little bit differently. In fact, we've begun some discussions on those, of how those might shift, and I'll explain what that shift has been. Predominantly, we have 3 required tech credits in the Nampa School District, and they are basic classes that we require. Business Computer Applications 1, Business Computer Applications 2, and a multimedia course. In discussion with our stakeholders, the thing that came up over and over again was, maybe it's not about getting a certification for Microsoft Word, for example, or Microsoft Office, but it really is the need for students to be able to word process, use spreadsheets, email professionally. Those types of the things that came up over and over again. So our recommendation is that we look at realigning what those tech credits are. Also, some other things that came up from various stakeholders was the shift and change in technology even within the last 4 years. The idea of social media and actually producing social media is a skill that our kids need. They're doing it all the time right now, and they may be doing it in ways that help or harm them in the long run. So that was a conversation that came up. And what we were going to propose with recommendation A is that we change business computer apps to being a business computer applications 1 semester course focused on word processing, spreadsheets, email, and the presentation software. We have data that most of our students entering from the junior high level have a fair amount of proficiency in presentation software, but not those other areas. So we want to focus on that as a basis. The next thing that came up was a lot of things that get wrapped into the idea of technology, but they really are soft skills, interviewing skills, showing up on time, all those things that all of us adults want for all of our kids that, quite honestly, our kids learn by getting a job and getting their teeth kicked in a couple of times, like, oh, I was late, the boss was mad at me. Oh my gosh, I lost my job because I couldn't show up and do those things. So what we are proposing is re-looking at the technology classes to incorporate a semester of that. Parallel with that is something that's happening in the state of Idaho, which is called Next Steps Idaho, and it's really looking at our 4-year career plans for what students are doing. We truly believe that by requiring these 2 new courses of business computer applications for technical expertise, and then a semester of soft skills and interviewing skills, those types of things will put our kids in position to be successful. The 3rd technology credit that we want is really about kids having choice in the technology field. Again, we are in 2021. Everything we do is technology driven. By having a business computer 1 and 2 and the multimedia as we have, we've maybe restricted too much what kids may want to do with technology, where they may want to go. So our recommendation is that we find a way to get them the essential skills that our business communities and our higher education folks, those next opportunities are getting, are saying they need these, and also offering some student choice and voice in what they do in that 3rd technology credit. So that's the basis for recommendation A. Okay. Recommendation B and C are very, very similar, and they're very minimal, but we do want to go through them with you to make sure that the graduation requirement committee does think it's important for the board to consider this. Recommendation B is the idea that in the state law, there is 1 credit required in both PE and health, not a PE credit and a health credit, but 1 credit in PE health. In our district, we currently offer a health credit, which is much more around healthy living, healthy choices, dieting, mental health, all those things that help make a healthy person, as well as we have a physical education component. We think that we need to keep those components for a variety of reasons, but we do think that there's a way for us to open up what counts as a physical education requirement. For example, marching band, being involved in any athletics after school, the amount of hours and activity that our kids do, we feel like we need to find a way to honor that credit so they have more opportunity within their school day to use for other credits. So that's recommendation B. Recommendation C is very similar with the idea of humanities and what might work for students, what they might need. Our recommendations are looking at every kid in the Nampa district. And when you look at that, there's a reality that you have to understand every kid has a different future path that they want to do. We may have some kids that want to be an NCAA athlete. We may have some kids that want to enter right into vocation right after they graduate. We might have some kids who want to go to the military. We might have some kids who don't know what they want to do. I would argue that's a lot of them. But that idea, we debated back and forth. We looked at what can we do to open up that idea of making humanities credits valuable for our folks. We just had our visual arts and humanities present, and that is phenomenal. We have some kids that is their jam. We have some kids that when you say draw a stick figure, they're like, I'm gonna screw that up. So it's really, really difficult to find that balance. We are in the process. I reached out to our HR department after we came up with these recommendations to discuss what certification issues may be there. But we are wanting the board to consider offering humanities credits for any course that incorporates the definition of humanities, which is a design and a construction component of some sort. So we might be talking about a welding class meeting a humanities requirement. And on its face, some people are like, wait a second, welding is vocational. But at the end of the day, the design and the expertise and the technical ability that our students have, we do feel we need to look at opening up those opportunities for humanities credits based off what their goal is and where they want to go. So in a nutshell, we spent a lot of time talking about the graduation requirements. It can look like we didn't change much because on its face, it's the same number. All of those things stay consistent. But what we did do through a lot of communication and collaboration with a variety of stakeholders was find out we need to incorporate more student voice and choice in how we're getting to those requirements. That was it. In the time I was privileged to work on the committee, that's what I noticed is we need to find a way to really connect with our students in their high school years to understand what their goal is, where they want to go, and then help them build those skills rather than being this track or this track or this track, and that's all you have. So those are the basis of our 3 recommendations, and I would definitely stand for any questions you guys have. Chairman Ross, Co-Chair Ross on the committee, and then Trustee Ross definitely helped get me up to speed, shared a number of documents. Ms. Tammy Wallen shared a wealth of information. So again, I appreciate them getting me up to speed, and I apologize for the tardiness of getting this recommendation to you. But as we all know, we've been focused on a couple other things for the last few years. So I would stand for questions if there are any.
Madam Chair, if I may, can you help me understand when you would like this to go into effect?
So that is definitely something based off what the board decides, and there would be an implementation. And truly what the best way to do it is to grandfather a class in. So we would look at this incoming group of freshmen or whenever it's made so that we would have reasonable time to build that within their schedule and then make sure that we could meet what those requirements are. So really there's flexibility in that. It could be the class of 2023, for example. Maybe we find a way to do that based off what coursework they've been exposed to. We could have a graduated plan of what that looks like. But within a 4-year cycle, we should have incoming freshmen. If the board chooses any one of these recommendations or all 3 of them, we should be able to have an incoming class of freshmen be able to graduate under these new requirements. So
Another question, can you give me you gave us some great examples for the humanities credit. For that 3rd technology credit, you didn't necessarily mention anything. Can you maybe give me some examples of classes?
Sure. So we have a number of classes already. We have information technology, we have broadcasting of those things. And while there are some changes in CTE that may dictate what we have on the books right now, what we really are doing is asking our technology department to come up with classes and electives that kids will be engaged and interested in. And one of those will be social media production. That could be anything from, quite honestly, if you ask a number of freshmen, I guarantee you one of the top vocations they want is to be a YouTuber. That's very colloquial, but I guarantee that's the data that they want to do. So those are the things that we want to do is develop courses that would meet that requirement so they understand being a YouTuber isn't just about having a pretty face or being funny. Being a YouTuber and being successful at it requires a marketing plan, requires connections, requires all those things. And that's one class that we would offer and build over time. Again, we have a wealth of those right now that are some of our upper division technology and business courses that could fit that need. What's happened is by restricting to BCA 1, BCA 2, and multimedia, some of our kids that are more capable technology-wise, by the time they get to BCA 2, they're like, are you kidding me? And we actually, we don't intend to, but we actually take that joy away from them. So if we could find ways to them to show us in the semester they have the skill that they need. Then we can talk about the soft skills that we know that they think they have, but we know that they don't have. And then they could actually have an elective and have more voice in where they want to go. That's what our proposal is.
And with each of those classes, the BCA 1 and 2, are those a semester class or year one?
Those are semester courses, and we would logistically, it's not in the recommendation, but logistically, we would actually suggest holding those at the freshman level for a variety of reasons, including helping kids build with that next steps Idaho and the 4-year plan thing. That's going to happen either way of whatever we do.
Right.
That conversation will be there, but that third technology credit, which right now is a required sophomore level class because we pair it logistically with our speech class on the opposite side, that would actually take on a much more fluid scenario where maybe I don't take that third tech requirement until my junior or senior year. So, and that would be a semester-based class as well.
Another question, I apologize. So inquisitive. With the soft skills class you talked about, how much of that, and I haven't taken a speech class in the Nampa School District, so I don't know, but how much of that is covered in a speech class?
So there are pieces of it that we could say are covered in speech, for example, the idea of public speaking.
Mm-hmm.
But the soft skills and the instruction on soft skills is not the focus of a communications class. The communication class is how to actually write a speech that incorporates the details that are going to engage your audience and those things.
Yeah.
And again, while there's bleed over there, that's not, here's how I start to market myself to my prospective employer, to my prospective university, to my recruiter if I'm going to the military, and helping kids build a pathway to develop those skills. It's really a question of self-efficacy is what we're trying to help them build.
I can see there's some overlap.
Correct.
With
We do feel like that would be what, let me take a step back. I feel like that will be a lot as a high school principal to ask the speech teacher to then incorporate those things.
I understand.
It is one of those classes that I think we have to accept if the board chooses to go that way. There will be some bumps and bruises. It's hard to figure out those soft skills. That's why they're soft skills.
Yeah.
But there has been a trial at Columbia. Katie had taught at the high school to life. That's the basis for what we've done. And he has actually taught that course for college credit through BSU. And there's a way to do it at that level. He did some great work for us in helping with the committee and came up with really 3 units in the course, a semester course. And it's all about marketing that person and helping them understand how they're developing a brand, they're developing habits that lead to more or less opportunities for them once they graduate.
That was my next question. Is this high school to life was kind of the jumping word into this?
And the reason that we would like to look at moving that down to the freshman level is we could have that conversation of middle school to high school. Like
Right.
the challenge that I can speak to as a high school leader is the first year of high school. Freshmen typically, partly because of developmentally where they're at, and we love them, but they put themselves behind the 8 ball. So now I've got to dig my way out. Again, we're talking about all students in our system, not those students who are really highly motivated and know they want to be X and they've been working at X since they were 2, right? We're not talking about that student per se, but freshmen put themselves in that hole. What we'd like to do is help get them the skills so that they can start to think about that earlier and make their high school experience much more relevant, much more self-driven, because that's the way we build self-advocacy. I talk about all the time, we get frustrated with where our kids are. They have to ask us to go to the bathroom. And it makes no sense to me, but that's for another day. So.
I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Feedback from me on the process. Awesome. Happy to give it. I think I'm going to start back at the beginning because I think the best part about this committee was that we did it completely different than any other board committee that I've seen or been a part of in this district. And that was, we didn't grab a couple teachers, a couple parents, and sit in a room of 15 people and make decisions for this whole charge. We have our committee list, which you can see that included people from those avenues. But then what we did is we went out and we called them the ambassadors for their group and said, okay, now the teacher group, we need to go back to all of you. We went to every high school and we went physically there. So Nampa High had their meeting with all the teachers. They just incorporated us into that meeting, into their agenda. And we visited with every staff member at Nampa High. and asked them the questions, you know, what would you like to see that would make you proud of every Nampa High graduate? What classes do you think our graduating students need? What makes you proud? What do you think we're deficient at? Were really the big main questions. We did that with every high school for staff. We did that for every high school at a separate meeting for parents. We had the migrants, a separate meeting for them. So 15 meetings in total, hundreds of people provided input. And so I am happy to share with you, there is limited notes here. Happy to share with you all those notes from all those meetings with current students, with previous students that had already graduated. We met at Flying M because that's where our previous students like to hang out. So that was a really exciting part of all this work that really took a lot of time, and appreciated that. The conundrum we came up with as we got deeper and deeper and heard more and more feedback wasn't about the number of units of credits. It became about content. It became about options and those soft skills that are in a class. So that's what's different. Really, our recommendations here are probably not, I don't entirely think there's something that we are supposed to be voting on as a board, because really we didn't come back and say, we would like an extra half a credit of personal finance, which did come up often, which was a big topic, or we want to reduce one of our tech credits required for graduation. It really became this topic of creating increased opportunities and options to satisfy the credits that we as a board ask for. But that's really not our charge or what we do, right? We don't talk about staffing. We talked about schedules, we talked about staffing, and we talked about those because I think you have to be mindful of the program as a whole. But at the end of the day, most everybody came back with leaving things alone. There was a good reason to have them as is. And so there's more documents I would love to share with you before you vote on this. We do have a whole spreadsheet of all those credits for our district, for all the districts in our surrounding areas, and the state minimum requirements for graduation. I think that helps bring clarity, especially to the recommendations, whereas the state doesn't require PE, but we do, and why. And some of those conversations that I think you can see more clearly in there. Any questions more?
I just have one, on the humanities part you talked about, is that for just a particular pathway, or would that be open to all students?
It would be open to whatever we could make that available, Trustee Kim. So again, the thing that could restrict us there, and we've already begun this discussion with HR, is to double check with the state and make sure that we're meeting what certification needs are there. Yeah. But the heart of it is, Trustee Ross, is to provide more options for kids to be able to do that. So no, it's not just the welding pathway. It's not just the construction pathway. It could be one that came up that's actually really interesting is the culinary pathway. The idea of a chef actually using art in their work. That's not much, you don't get much more humanities than that, right? And so that conversation of what could we do to incorporate those pieces. So one other thing, just on the personal finance piece, again, that came up over and over again. What we landed on as a committee is in our economics course, we do have a unit that's taught that's on personal finance within that course. And we have recently started to look at a math course and have taught that actually at the last 2 years of personal finance at a math level for particularly some of our seniors that actually touch on some of those numerical mathematical pieces of personal finance. But again, as we've discussed, there's this other piece of personal finance. It's the habits, the ability to understand and know and to budget themselves. That's another conversation, but we couldn't come up with a clean way to do that as a committee. And again, offering another half cut, do we do that? And we couldn't come to that realization. So
yeah, there was a lot of conversation about how do you care for, as he said, every student that has a different idea and a different goal. And so we said, well, we have a lot of athletes, but do they know what the NCAA requirements are? They're more stringent than our current graduation requirements. If you want to go to a university out of state, there's more stringent requirements, but how do you know that? So that's really an information piece, that if that's your path, and that's where you want to be, then we should provide you the information, provide you the options in classes, hence the humanities conversation, whereas some of the state standards are very strict and very succinct about exactly what needs to be to satisfy that requirement. And some things that are district driven, we have more flexibility on. And so we kind of decided it really wouldn't be fair to every student to mandate some of those requirements for certain people. However, they should be mindful of it. So we even talked about tiering our graduation diplomas. So it was, if you did this CTE pathway with all these extra things, or that you had this level of a diploma versus this level of a diploma, if you met certain credit criterias, and that way we could even maybe reduce, because we are 5 credits over the state standards right now. So we thought, well, if we reduce that, you're hitting your standard diploma. And if we increase things, you're hitting a next level. The counselors, the teachers, the staff, we're adding a whole level of complexity. And then we thought, okay, what are we gaining? And especially when we have kids that move into our district, because remember, this is for all kids. This is for special ed, this is for ELL. These are for kids that come in their senior year, and all of a sudden, they've got to pick up all these units and courses that we can lay out nicely in 4 years that fit into a schedule that don't for them. And then they're struggling to graduate to our standards because we've added so many extra things. And then hence the flexibility to say, okay, well, what have you had in your electives over the years of your high school career? And what can we make work for us? So we really ended up back where we started after a lot of discussion.
And I would just offer as well that as Trustee Ross has spoken about, hundreds of people have been involved in this in some way. And so whenever that happens and the timeline gets elongated like it has, there's going to be a lot of information that comes out. And I do genuinely believe, though, because of the work of Trustee Ross, of our secondary director, Steve LeBou, our previous secondary director, Scott Parker, Tammy Wallet, I truly believe that this isn't a case of, oh, we've done all this work, let's go back to that. That's not what happened here. There really was a lot of discussion about what works best for our students, because that essential question, again, of what we want our students to know and be able to do is a really, 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 really important question. And again, it's not to pat ourselves on the back or not to dismiss and not to try and raise the bar if necessary, but the data and the perception showed we do a pretty dang good job. So let's get better at doing that pretty dang good job even better. So
math came up, right? We only have 3 years of math. Should we have 4? Business community came back and said, your people should be better at math. Well, they should be better. We look at our math scores, we realize we can do better with what we have. And that's what we need to do. That's why, again, it started to just come back to content, not additional requirements.
My question, Superintendent, is I understand with the technology and the PE, because it's above the state, that the flexibility in what we count for that other piece, we'd have that flexibility, or but that humanities piece, which I don't disagree with. I think when you're building and making anything, actually, you are hitting that creative and artistic element, which is truly humanities. But I worry, would those be things that the state would approve as a humanities credit, or what would that process look like to start going down that road possibly with the state?
Sure. So we are looking at that, and that is a place where we may not be able to implement fully recommendation C because of the state's requirements for certification. So number one, our CTE teachers come to us with a very specific certification in itself, what a welding teacher comes to, particularly out of industry, and then what a humanities teacher has to be prepared for. There isn't a lot of overlap, so there's likely to be a barrier or two to think through, but we'll have this conversation and see where it gets us.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other?
What can we bring to the board? And for your action, for your decision? What's going to be more helpful?
Can I clarify? I think you are really elegant and right in saying, because what you've done is you have not changed our graduation requirements. You've just encouraged us to find other ways to meet them. Our 3 technology credits do not say BCA 1, BCA 2, and multimedia. So we already have the flexibility to take those and reshape those. We have the flexibility, in fact, Mr. Yarbrough has the flexibility for a senior coming in and saying, oh, we're not going to make you go back to the sophomore level US or whatever. So he does have that flexibility in order to meet that. So with this recommendation coming from the committee, and unless the board wants to do something specific, it wouldn't be changing graduation requirements because that's not where the recommendation is.
I mean, that's what I was feeling is like, I don't think we need to change anything. It's just a matter of investigating, yeah, can we do these things and getting it done? I mean, like you talked about, Waylon, like, what does that look like? Can we fit those classes in? Will it be a speech teacher that's doing this, or is it somebody else that's teaching that, or what is that requirement? So that's kind of where, I mean, I feel like the recommendation was not to change anything as far as what we make a decision on. The credits and the number of credits and what kind of credits is going to stay the same.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I want to affirm where you're going with
Yeah.
A and B. I mean, I think since that's the sense of this board, I think the only concern is what we can, with C is what we can do legally, with that. But I love the richness and the choices for students.
What we can do is we can bring back the standards that we're teaching to, or the shape, and say, hey, the second credit really ended up being, here are the essential outcomes that we're looking for. Here's maybe the final product that we think that we'll incorporate. Those are things that we can bring back as we develop that curriculum. And then we can certainly bring back a recommendation as to how do we make this transition. So if eventually we're not going to require BCA2 and multimedia, how do we do that? So no student is caught in between 2 separate worlds.
So Madam Chair, may I ask just for clarification? So this is not something that necessarily needs any board approval because nothing is changing.
It's up to the board. So the charge of the committee was to review the recommendation, or to review current graduation and come back with up to 3 recommendations.
Okay.
And so really, you're looking at 3 recommendations of options of content that really aren't really in our purview, with 1 recommendation being leave it alone. But the board really has the option to decide after we do the work and come back. We provide the content, the board ultimately votes on what they want to do. So I think maybe I'd really like to give you guys the spreadsheet of all the credits in.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah.
And this is just a cross-reference of most of the neighboring districts. There are a few on from Eastern Idaho that we looked at, similar size districts, to get a sense of what they're requiring. Just as a quick flavor, for example, West Ada on the same schedule as us has 56 required credits. We only have 51. Caldwell has 46 on a 7-period schedule. And then it varies from 46 to 48 in another 51, which is Valley View, but they're on a 7-period schedule. So very, very similar. But again, like Chris Russ, would be able to look and see what those differences are.
So this would be something that we would maybe have an action item on a later agenda.
I apologize, but that was my understanding. This was just truly for discussion. This was just to
Yes.
get back to you guys. Hey, here's where we're at. So
Great, thank you. And Trustee Ross, do you think the committee could bring us that picture of that supports the conclusion around that what we do now prepares kids well for the next step?
Our summary of notes from all of our groups.
I just didn't know the evidence behind that statement. Does that make sense?
Yep, and that's what we have, is we have a summary of notes that all of our focus groups kind of their key points that they touched on.
Yeah, because you mentioned we need to do better in math.
Yep.
But it's not an issue of, oh, you have to take more math classes. It's within the system that we have.
Yes, and we have a survey on that. We're happy to share where we got that. So we should share all of our notes with you and some surveys that we sent out and send you the results of those.
One last comment I would like to make, I would just like to thank everybody who's been on the committee and their work for that, because again, with it being this long, it's been a true, Ms. Wallen has been instrumental. Trustee Ross has helped drive a number of meetings. And then recently, Secretary Director Steve Ledoux has helped kind of guide and push a lot of these things through with other things on our mind. So I would like to say thank you to them and all of our other groups who, quite honestly, I never met. One outside, Mitch Minetti has been instrumental in touching base with our secondary ed and then some of our business groups. So again, just I think that bears saying that it is a group effort. We appreciate that. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you both, and thanks for your group. Next, yeah, we have our calendar revision or waiver approval.
So we did reconvene our calendar committees, and the recommendation does come with them as they looked again at all of the hours and responsibilities. So there are several state requirements that we have to meet. One of them is a secondary student has to spend a total of 990 hours throughout the year in the secondary system in order for it to qualify. In addition, there's a semester requirement. So for every semester credit, there needs to be 60 hours of seat time. Literally seat time. Because of the priority that we've put on trying to build relationships with students and making sure that we can develop some of these things that Mr. Yarbrough has already talked about. First semester, B-Day only, we find ourselves short of the 60 hours. Not the 990 hours. We exceed that throughout the year. But in order to make sure that we are legal and aligned, we need to do something. And calendar committee came up with a couple of options. Actually going to start with option 3, which is the messiest and what they would prefer not to do. A really easy way to do this is to put the semester ending after Christmas. Because you'll notice in the document that we've got plenty of hours in second semester, both A-Day and B-Day. Right now, we feel that we have produced a calendar for our parents, and that would probably not be cohesive with what we told them to expect and to be able to do. And so we would suggest that's not the option we pursue. The calendar committee did come up with 2 other options. One is to do the waiver, and that takes board approval. So for B days, it's a little over 58 hours that students actually spend in the classroom, and the board can approve a waiver, and we submit that to the state. Option number 1, and we do thank our association for working with us on this, because this actually honestly violates the contract, in that on a teacher approved professional development day, we would ask our secondary teachers to provide e-learning for their students. So on Thursday, they would make sure that there were additional opportunities for kids, and somehow we would have to collect that in an e-learning atmosphere. Again, probably the most negative thing about this is I believe our parents have looked at our calendar and they believe that Friday, October 29th is a day of no school. And this would be a change just a few months out from that, where their high school student only would be expected to complete some work. It does solve the problem, and there would be no waiver necessary. So when the calendar committee got together and brainstormed their options, these were the 3 options that they wanted the board to look at in order to rectify the situation.
So just clarifying, we have enough hours for the year. We have enough hours on the A days in first semester. We're just short 2 hours on B days. We can make a waiver for that and we'll still satisfy the overall requirement. What is the negative of a waiver?
Certainly, like if we talk about math, the more time we have with students, the better we can be at math. So it would just be a reduction of hours that we have in instruction. So that would be the negative part. Honestly, we don't really want to be as close to that line as we can. We want to spend time with our students and make sure each of them have an opportunity to learn those things that we want them to know and be able to. So that's the negative. It's less time with the student in this particular content area. In many cases, at our high school, it doesn't make a lot of difference because we don't have a lot of semester-only classes. We do have some. So in a US history class, that whole content is taught over the whole year. And so we're not, but certainly in a speech class, where if a student is taking that first semester, if there's 2 hours less of instruction first semester, then there would be second.
For clarification, 2 hours would be just a little over one class period.
Correct.
Madam Chair Superintendent, in the past, did the waivers also have to be approved by the state?
We do submit them to the state and they do have final approval, but it does come from the Board of Trustees and then to the state.
Any other questions?
Just one, and then option one is the recommendation from the administration. And
Administration would actually prefer option 2 because we think that honors what we told parents will happen in this calendar year. Option 1, our high school students and our parents wouldn't experience a no school day on Friday, October 29th. And we have high school teachers then who will be expected to provide instruction on a day when we've told them it should be professional development.
Madam Chair, and option 3 is maintaining the same days of school on the calendar, but pushing finals until later. Is that the only thing that's disruptive and unreasonable?
That is, yes, sure.
No other.
So probably what would happen then with the ways that days are structured after Christmas, we have to rearrange professional development days and some work days in order for that rhythm. And the calendar committee at this point felt strongly about keeping the pattern or the footprint the same, making the corrections and then moving forward, making sure that we don't have to do this.
One more question. Yeah. So our PD days, can you explain that theory behind how they're set up with the semesters and how that disrupts the flow?
So a calendar committee and the hours and the days that our students is really quite complicated. So what would have to happen is we'd have to go back into December, and since that isn't going to be a semester break, the days Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday before Christmas would now remain full days instead of early release days for secondary. So that would have to change. Parents would have to adjust to that. Then coming back, we start with either a work day or a professional development day. Well, that probably may or may not make sense if we still have semester finals to work in. So we may have to move that one, get kids back in school, go a couple of weeks or a week, just depends. It sounds easier than it actually is.
Because finals are typically half days and we do early releases for that.
And the reason finals are before Christmas, this is based on feedback from parents, is that correct? That
Correct.
families would prefer to have finals.
Families and students.
Yes. Can't disagree. My other question is, was this just an oversight of the calendar committee, the hours, the 2 hours, or?
So there was originally a day of professional development that was counted as instructional. So that's where part of this comes from. It also is a result on Wednesdays trying to carve out some additional time to work with students on their 4-year college and career plan and making sure that they are working on those soft skills and those types of things.
Option 1, would the negotiation team have to reconvene?
I I think option one violates the contract. Again, our association was kind and said, I think we could do this. So the calendar committee, which has some association members on it, said, let's put this idea forth. And so, yes, I believe we have to open up the contract and look at that because I think it violates the contract.
I think it's challenging to end the semester after Christmas. Students can be so, it's like they've moved on. I think there's value in having finals before Christmas, certainly. Madam Chair,
Yeah.
I move that we approve option 2 for the calendar adjustment.
So it was moved by trustee Kip and seconded by trustee Keller. Any discussion?
Struggling with all three options. Like the message that it sends, the less hours, it's always difficult. I think that's something that's been brought up every time we see the calendar, is how the first semester always is so off as far as less hours. And I think students do feel that in that crunch, and not seeing the calendar, I'm sure that the calendar committee has put together what they feel is the most non-intrusive as least as possible. And I'm struggling with all these options as being viable. I would almost urge the district to go back and look for some other options.
So what are, I guess I need to know more, maybe what you're thinking.
I'm not sure which day was counted as instructional time, what other days in the first semester we could not have as PD days, or time, how much time seat on those Wednesdays that we have early release. We make up that amount of time missing if we altered the Wednesday bell schedule. I don't know, I'm already guessing off the top of my head, and that's why we said I would urge the district to go back and find some other potential solutions.
Remind me, like the PD and the PLC is
So,
contractual, or
PLC and Wednesdays are contractual, so all of those solutions would also cause us to reopen the contract and renegotiate those.
yeah, motions on the floor. Any other discussion? Questions? I totally understand where you're at. I just, with number one, which is an easier fix. I worry about it being contractual. So to me, that's a non-option. So it would be 2 and 3. For me, just kind of thinking about it. And knowing that, yeah, it is our semester only classes that are impacted the most on those B days first semester. Any other? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of option 2, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Nay. Right? 3 to 2, what I heard. Thank you.
Can you clarify again?
Sorry, these 3, Keller, Westfall, and Kip said yay?
And you said no.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you. All right, so the next item really is to get in front of the board, some work that we will do at the work session. So the State Board of Education CIP matrix, again, reminding the board that this is new and a little bit complicated. We have inserted, because it's a state requirement, the performance targets from last year, and those are there. And our plan in the work session is to share with you where the district ended up, where the state averages are, and a recommendation for what those new targets would be. And just as a heads up, generally, what we try to do, what we have done in the past, and until COVID hit, we're very successful in a 3-year amount of time, taking from where we were to where we were going to meet the state average. That's where we would like to do again, so that we can look at that growth. And we'll show you that trend pattern in the work session of what we have accomplished from 17 until 19, which was quite on target to make that happen. Just the interruption of instruction at this time. So that's what we'll do. And what we'll provide for you for your discussion at the work session, so that you have this opportunity to look at it. We'll dig into it in the work session, and then you'll have the September full session in order to approve that CIP matrix that's required by the state. We'll also have for you, Mr. George, can you go down to the bottom? If you remember, yeah, no, keep going. I feel like, is that the end of it?
That's the end of it.
It's the second tab, which is probably not here. So we shared with you the complicated opportunities we have. We've been meeting, and we think we have a way to address that, and we'll present that to you also during the work session, so you get an opportunity to think through that and give us some feedback.
Because that won't need to be approved until the September
Correct.
meeting, because it's due by
to the state
October.
board, October 1.
Perfect, thank you. Questions?
Yeah, Chairman Simpson, are the 2021 performance targets that are filled in this whole document, are those the targets or the actual numbers from that year?
Those are the targets, because that's what the state requires in that column. And then we will show you the results
Of the actual.
So you'll see that in the work session as well. And then the responsibility, will give you some recommendations, but ultimately the new code says that you would set some targets for us. And so we'll give you some ideas of where we think that might be based on our growth in the past, and based on what an annual growth for a student would look like.
And is this going to be something collaborative that we're all going to be working on together in that work session?
Yes, yeah,
Thank you.
very much so. Any other questions? I know the last we heard that the state might have scores and things all cleaned up, but it was gonna be like pretty close to like September, I thought, but I can't remember exactly.
I'm gonna let Anita Christensen-Wilkins give us the latest update.
They just announced today that they're going to still hold off with any of our appeals for participation until mid-September, which would be a little late for us to get final results. They plan to release this week or next week the tentative results. The State Department will, based on state board requests. And so we'll have raw numbers that we'll use to do the best we can to prepare our plan for the state board.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll also have the IRI results for you and the disaggregation by demographics, because that's an important part of this discussion as well.
Perfect, thank you. If no other questions, okay. And then the strategic work plan.
Right, which is his partner, and Dr. Russell is here to walk you through some ideas so that we're ready to discuss and look at this collaboratively during the work session in September as well.
Madam Chair, Simpson trustees, thank you for giving the opportunity to talk with you a little bit today about our strategic work plan. Just going to give you a general overview of it today. because we're going to spend more time in our work session reviewing it, going in more depth, hopefully getting some feedback and input of some of the goals that I just mentioned that we'd like to see. Just a reminder of some of the history with this plan. This plan is often the main focuses in which we try to move and improve student achievement on. There's 7 strategic areas in which we do that. With the history, if you noticed, the first couple of years with this plan got us with the great results that we had, where we were closing instructional gaps, positive gains in every single one of our state assessment areas. We'll review that more when we do our work session. Of course, then we had the cyber attack and COVID, which kind of really slowed that plan down then. And then last year, because of the COVID and the pandemic, we focused primarily just on operational things. And so we kind of scrapped a lot of that stuff, focused on operation just so we could keep schools running efficiently as we could. This plan, what you'll see is a movement back into the instructional focuses that we had prior. There's some modifications to it, but generally that's kind of the history where it's been. So it's kind of been great for a couple of years, derailed a little bit, trying to get back on track so that we can get back to those gains that we had. So first of all, just strategic area 1, if you go through that, you'll see that there's a focus on early literacy. There's a focus on MAP assessments and having benchmarks that would give us an opportunity to see where our students come in as soon as they enter school. Gives us an opportunity to do some assessments a couple of times that year so we can look at where our student strengths and weaknesses are that allow us to address our instruction and look at some of the curriculum and ensure that we could develop some quality tier 1 and tier 2 instruction with that. Area 2, generally you'll see a focus around highlight instruction and having a clear framework for instruction. This comes from the highly reliable schools, which really articulates what type of instructional strategies we want to see in our classroom. I'll have some examples in our strategy or our work sessions so that we can look through that and see what some of the other school districts have done so we get a little bit more clarity around that. You'll also see there's a focus there around working with our instructional coaches around a coaching cycle, actually getting stronger in that process of sitting and working with our teachers on helping them reflect, look at data, look at their instructional strategies and practices so we can improve our practice. Strategic area 3 is a focus around professional learning communities. This will drive much of the work that you'll see in there. You'll see there's a lot of reflection around looking at data that takes place in the professional learning community. So it's a huge part, even though it's only a small section to it, it's actually interwoven throughout the plan. Area 4, the whole child. You see quite a few focuses around special education there. A lot of those deal with the IDLPs, which is something that the state introduced last year. They're encouraging districts to continue with that for some of our special ed students. You'll see there's some focus on some sensory needs with our kids and looking at climate and culture within our SPED department because it is a very demanding field. It's a very demanding area, a hard area to find teachers and folks to work in. As we just mentioned earlier, the SLPs and special ed, OT, some of those are the hardest to fill positions. So climate and culture is an important one for us. Strategic area 5 focuses on working with our administrators to help them understand the framework of highly reliable schools. If you remember just a couple of months ago, we did a general overview of those basic areas. We're going to start helping our administrators dig into that a little bit more to reflect on their current practices that take place in the school. Area 6 talks about our facilities and our communication plans and our budget. You'll see that there. And then area 7 is focusing around building strong partnerships with our community. We've had some exciting partnerships with folks in our community that have given us some resources, and we're going to continue to try to have that focus in there. So that's kind of the general overview of the plan. As I mentioned, we'll spend a lot more time going into detail, looking at it, getting some feedback and thoughts from you on some of the areas where you see strength, some of the areas where you may want to see us maybe focus a little bit differently. Take that input and finalize it. So you'll see this is currently a draft. That's kind of the purpose of it. We'll have it finalized by the 1st of October, and that's when it needs to be finished. Any questions I can try to answer for you?
I appreciated the information about highly reliable schools because I saw how in this document, what we learned in that presentation, how that's providing a framework for the various good things that the district has been doing, but it's uniting it together. I think your words, common language and under a specific structure. I'm grateful for the work that's been done.
the rest.
Yeah, so can the board get a copy of Marizona's Highly Reliable Schools book that's referenced in here so that we can be prepared for that? And also in goal 1.3, and a couple times you mentioned the NWEA measure of academic progress. Is there any literature or sites that we as a board could look at so we're familiar with that as well?
Sure.
Thank you.
I was wondering, Madam Chair, we've talked at prior sessions about community engagement and the board's role and maybe listening. And I was wondering if we can talk more about this at the work session, is in these areas around communication and community engagement, if there's some work there that we can identify. I think we've talked about surveys, things like that. Listening. As we move forward from this year into another year. I want to echo something that Kim had said. I was hoping we could hear a little more about the MAP assessment. I'm trying to remember if this gives us any opportunity to look at our own assessments as a way of measuring progress in the system, if this would help us in that. And some more information on a curriculum management plan. I'm trying to remember what it's called at the beginning. What is that? What does that, maybe just a little bit more, because I was reading it wondering what is that?
Got it down, absolutely.
Thank you.
Anything? I'm just going to share just some random thoughts, no true requests or questions. As I was reviewing our strategic work, I went back and reviewed the last 4 years, every year that I've been a trustee, and the strategic work. And quite a bit of it is continued each year. Strategic areas 6 and 7 are both actually identical all 4 years. And so I would love to expand upon those in a different way. So I would love to think about that and engage in that as well. And then I noticed, but some of them, like in the first strategic areas, we talk about IRIs every year or math every year, and we should, right? Also though, as I looked through each year, particularly like in math, what we were looking at or the tools we were using that year, they changed each year as well. And so maybe even just, is it good to stop and review those and say, we changed because of building blocks and we learned, or I guess we never, every year we get a new strategic work plan, but we never truly hear about the year prior. And sometimes we do, like unified class that was supposed to be for standards-based grading. We heard throughout the year that didn't work. Then the next year we see Otis, and so we understand that. And so there are some areas that we do understand because we've been updated, but some other areas, I think it's area 5.1 that the principals are trained on. They're trained on every year it was something different. And maybe just I don't know, I was just thinking it might be nice to know how that went or why we're not adding on to that as a building block and we're changing to something new. It's because we mastered it and we're implementing it and we're moving on. I was really just reviewing and contemplating our plans over the last 4 years. So I don't know, just my random thoughts as I really researched it, of kind of being meaningful about this year in reflection and in going forward.
Thank you. And that crossed my mind too, because we've had this conversation, I think, Dr. Russell, like we're still doing personalized learning, but it's not a strategy in this year's work, and our focus schools still going to do those. But the work for them has already occurred and they're trying it. And I think kind of going back to your question of when do we reflect on, was MPL, it's a big investment that we've made. What are the indicators that it's helped us move the needle?
Yeah, it'd be nice to know. And then is that something that we should expand upon and continue, or is that and I don't know that we get those data points or as deep of an understanding at our level as you probably already have.
And those are things that we can involve in the superintendent evaluation too, right? Those, I mean, looking for those kind of, discovering what those data points that we want are,
Yeah.
and then having those, because that's how the strategic plan gets, I mean, that's part of, the evaluative process, is the holding the superintendent accountable for the things that are in this plan, and making sure as we're building that structure, that we're going to get the data points in a timely manner that we want them. So I think that's a way to, to get at what you're suggesting.
Right, and making, and that we're not asking something of the superintendent that isn't in the strategic work or that is applicable.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll have to go back to our community in the spring and say, because a good chunk of our levy fuels this is, in my perception, because it pays for our textbooks, our devices, professional development, people. And so I was just thinking about that as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Russell. Next, we have legislative priorities.
And the administration just took last year's, in talking with Chairman Simpson, eliminated some things that were kind of mute issues that were either rendered useless in the last session or no longer have meaning, reminding the trustees that this is the document that allows us to speak in common language, that these are priorities that the Nampa School District, the board, and the district would say are priorities, so that when we're speaking with our legislature, it's not just trustee Westfall's opinion, but the board has looked at this and it's the opinion of the board of trustees. So we would just love to listen, which one do you want to keep, which one do you want to add, and
Yeah, please do.
So probably the one that caught me off guard the most was whereas the Nampa School District employs over 450 classified personnel to support its efforts in providing a quality education for students, the board supports increased funding allocation for classified positions that reflect a livable wage of at least $15 an hour. That one seems new.
That was last year. Yeah.
I think we talked about that. My recollection is that we talked about that when we moved classified to 11. When we did that, we were talking about, what I remember was that we were talking about a goal of getting to 15. That's my recollection on what
Exactly.
that we were looking ahead. So for me, that fit because it was a building block on the next, it was the next step, I guess.
And remembering this is a funding mechanism we're talking here. We're not committing the district to $15 an hour. We're asking our legislature. So if they would do that at $15 an hour, that means that we have some additional monies to fund like the director of technology, which is more than a $15 an hour position or those types of things. So we're asking the legislature to increase the amount that they allocate toward classified positions.
And remind me what all the classified positions are again.
So we have paraprofessionals, we have front office people, we have things like our director of technology for jurors is a classified person, payroll is classified. So there's a variety of classified positions with a variety of funding ranges. And if you remember, we get $23,000 for each one of those. And $23,000 represents about a $10.80 an hour for somebody who works with us at a front desk or something like that.
Thank you. I have a lot of thoughts on that, and just that we're a free market economy, and we as a board already decided to up to the 11. But I wanted to clearly understand this because there's been a lot of economic reports come out lately about inflation and how those monies and increases just kind of get passed on and then create more hardships. And I think we've really seen that a lot lately. And I would never want to be in a position to create hardships, even in our community, for other small businesses that then don't have those same availabilities to also compete at that same rate. And so that's where my thought process was, and not remembering this and kind of just having a quick, oh, what is this and why are we doing this? Kind of a thought. But then there's funding for the state of having them reimburse us for that is a little bit of a different twist, I think, on that. And especially where these are some of there's a wide range of classified folks and even some of the higher technically skilled folks that we ask for in this. And so
And we've been trouble. Sorry, sorry.
no, you're good.
Yeah, and I think just filling some of our, some of our food service folks, that's been a challenge. That was part of that conversation with moving up to $11 an hour. The wide range.
Does this still have the same effect if we were to strike the specific amount that we supporting? Or do we need to? No. Increased allocation for classified positions, period.
I like that idea. Yes, I do.
Would you like to leave on the part that says that reflect a livable wage to make sure they know we're serious without putting a number on it? Or would you just put the period at classified position?
I'll let Elsie finish, but I'll say, I like the increased funding. Some of it is for what we're asking for them to do that matches with the scale of what we're asking, right? So we're not getting reimbursed in the same tiered manner of the qualifications of the people that we are hiring. And so that's what I would prefer to see in there instead of versus just kind of that base minimum.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what, depending upon the skilled level of the worker, is what we're seeing as a community right now that makes that conversation different.
I think I hesitate to take a value off of it because I worry then what do they replace that with, right? I mean,
the fact that they, that they're gonna fund every single position, classified position, the same is like ludicrous to me. Like, why would you fund it that way? But I get that it's easy because they just want to know how many classified personnel do you have? And then we're just gonna, we're gonna send the 23,000 for each one. And right, so I mean, it's hard for me. I mean, if we take away that number, what's that? And I wonder how many legislators even know what that number is. Right, so if you say that we want to increase funding, we want them to increase the allocation of those funds, they may not even know what that dollar amount equates to. Right? So I would like to have something in there that.
I guess I'm not of the opinion to tell somebody kind of to dictate what that should be. Truly.
That's funny.
Let them decide, let them look at it, let them educate themselves, let them go through that. And honestly, I really feel that way, that that is a free market economy. And I'm not going to tell you what I think that needs to be. We do recognize that they are not funding us to the same degree that we are paying out. And I think that's all that needs to be noted, and that we would like that to match for the level of the skill of what that employee does. And I think I feel adequate with that.
It's just not the way that it works, it seems, though, if they give a, you know, a X amount for classified and the skills of the classified person are, you know, so high required for some classified and not high in other situations. I feel like putting a target on it is helpful. I'm just saying, hopefully we can get here because it's so far below what the fair market wage is for some of our classified people. You know, it's much less than what they would garner on the open market.
If you guys in the audience need to have a conversation, you're free to step out. This
I'm
is,
sorry, we were just feeling sorry for trustee Ross because you just bullied her.
yeah,
That was me.
I,
So
you.
we were just supporting her, so forgive us.
Please
We're
stop
sorry.
talking or we're gonna recess this meeting. This is not your meeting to talk. Okay?
Stop bullying people. That's all we're asking.
We're gonna go ahead and recess, please.
That's how bully works. They run.